Kuding Makki Home Appliances Kidamak Hoina Waningai Lake. Kaisampat Kunjen Hazari Lekai Dalaiba, Mezo of Imphal na Ahong Mamalda, item Kuding Makki up to 50% discount offer Tizari. Wedding set Unalong Matandasu is special over discount Kayasu Hamzari. Interest Amata Yaudena 0% EMI loan gi Kudong Sabasu Hamzari. Kudong Sabasi Mahan Biraganu, Nasi Maklingsin Birapu, Mezo of Imphal, Kaisampat Kunjen Hazari Lekai.
Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ELITETV Open Debate in English. Today being Monday, we will be conducting our open debate in English to reach out to a wider audience beyond the boundaries of our state. I'm Utpala, your host for tonight. Over the past few days, we all have seen and heard about protests over the government's Agneepath scheme. Visuals of stone pelting incidents, burning of trains, etc., where the protests turned violent in 8 states were seen on TV as well as in newspapers. Congress leaders sat in a satyagraha at Jantar Mantar in the national capital. Internet services were suspended in Bihar. So what made rolling out this scheme erupt into a violent protest by army aspirants and the public? This policy was announced on the 14th of June 2022, where Indian youths in the age range of 17.5 to 21 years, 23 years for this year considering the pandemic, will be recruited into the army for a period of 4 years, and 25% top performers will continue with the service. But what about the 75% who do not make it? Our topic for tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Agneepath, Agneevir and Agni Pariksha. Our panelists for tonight are, we have Mr. Pradip Phanjoubam, editor, Imphal Review Arts and Politics. He's yet to join us. He will be joining us shortly. We have Advocate Junior Luwang, Advocate Supreme Court of India. Welcome to ELITETV Open Debate, Advocate Luwang. And last but not the least, welcome. And we have Lieutenant General Retired LN Singh. Welcome to ELITETV Open Debate, General LN Singh. Before we begin this discussion, I would like to give a warm welcome to our panelists once again. A warm welcome to you all. Welcome to ELITETV Open Debate. I'd like to open our debate with General LN Singh. General Singh, Agni Pariksha, fatal and negligent, no rank, no pension, unfair to rural youths. These are few of the phrases used by opposition leaders and people of India. The youth of the country are dissatisfied. Is there a gap in understanding the terms of the scheme right, or is there some kind of an underlying agenda by the government in introducing Agneepath scheme? Or are we putting our unemployed youths of the country through Agni Pariksha by rolling out Agneepath?
I will put it this way, that, see, it's unfortunate that some of the aspirants have taken to the streets, and possibly there has been a lot of misinformation, because Agneepath scheme is, in my opinion, one of the most excellent scheme if you look at the overall aim.
Okay.
What do the nation want the defense forces for? They want the defense forces for protecting the nation,
right?
To fight for the nation, to make sure that our enemy are scared of our nation. So we have to keep our defense forces young. We have to keep them professional. And it is not, at the end of the day, defense forces are not a welfare scheme. Because many people mistake or tend to go wrong in comparing the defense forces with, that is the Army, Air Force, Navy, with its counterpart in BSF or Assam Rifle or SSB or any other uniform force. I must explain here that the uniqueness of the defense forces, that is the Army, Air Force and Navy, is very clear that even as on today, a Jawan in the Army, Air Force and Navy retires almost at the age of 38 or 40 or 42. Whereas a person serving in the BSF, ITB, SSB, CRPF, Assam Rifle and other paramilitary forces, including police, they retire at the age of 60. Now somebody asks, why so? Because reason being, we have to keep our army young. Remember Kargil. Now imagine in the heights of the Kargil, if a 60-year-old man has got to climb up and fight, can he really do it? Definitely there is a problem.
Right.
So it's an effort all over the world to keep the army young. Now, unfortunately, this agitation, in my opinion, due to some misinformation or misgiving has taken place. In any case, it is not, in our case, the army is not compulsory. It is not conscription. It is a voluntary army. Anyone who wants to join the army can volunteer and join the army. And those who are not happy with the scheme may not join the army. He can go and join the CRPF, he can go and join the BSF, he can go and join the ITBP, he can join a host of other uniform. Because the army requires, we have to keep our army young. We have to, and in any case, earlier also, what happens is, for the officer cadre, there was a entry known as Short Service Commission. In this Short Service Commission, an officer had to serve 5 years. After that, whether he is retained or not, it depends on his performance. And this sort of the smaller length of service is not only applicable to India. Let us take the Defense IDF, Israel Defense Force. And there are many countries where people do join the service for as less as even 2 years. Even the Chinese were having conscription earlier, they have done away with it. So it depends on what is the requirement of the nation. And in my opinion, this is a very, very noble scheme. And in any case, if this really does not succeed, if the modification can be brought about later on. It's not a major issue because instead of 4 years, an extension of 1 year, 2 years can always be given. It is not very sacrosanct about it. But then without trying out a scheme, just simply condemning the scheme, saying, no, your scheme is bad. I don't think that is really very right.
Okay. But at the end of 4 years, if this is on an experimental basis, there could be a lot of repercussions at the end of 4 years. So is that even considered? I mean, has the government even thought about the possible outcome after 4 years? Because it seems like an experimental.
I will put it this way, that it is not a overnight thing. I retired about 4 years back. Even as early as that, we have been thinking, we have been writing paper, there has been a lot of discussion whether to keep it 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, like officers in 5 years. Because the Short Service Commission. So the question is, when we talk about the defense forces, what we were taught is the first thing we have to think, we have to focus is the nation. Protection of the nation is the primary job of the defense force. Second, in the defense, what I was taught is the man whom I command, the man with whom I work, my fellow soldiers. That is the second priority. Self is the last priority. All the people who are agitating now, they have done the other way around. They have put self is the first priority and nation is the last priority. You see, I really do not know, because at the end of the day, once a person is selected for the defense forces, he or she will require a police verification about his patriotism, about his other things. I really do not know how many of these people who are now out in the streets will ever really will don the defense uniform, because definitely if I am commanding a unit and I am commanding a few men, I am commanding thousands of men, if I am commanding lakhs of men, I would not want these type of people to be amongst me, because they will not be able to fight. Because fighting requires a totally different quality. It is not burning a train, it is not throwing a stone. It requires solid discipline, it requires solid motivation. Imagine the man in the Kargil war who was leading a march. He knows that his chances of going back home are very less. But he still did not refuse. He agreed to lead because it is his job. He is motivated. He is aware. His skill and other things, he has been taught that way. But here, without even joining, without even knowing what is it, just because some recruitment agencies or some political party or some people have said, no, this scheme is not good. So you start throwing stones, you start burning buses, you start terrorizing children who are in the school buses. I think this is absolutely uncalled for. And I will request that the youths must take advantage of this, including the youths in Manipur. Imagine 4,06,000 people are going to be recruited under this scheme every year. That is about almost much more than what was being recruited. So imagine, look at the positive side. Employment being generated, more percentage of the population is going to be covered.
Okay, thank you for your views, General L.N. Singh. My next question, I'd like to welcome Mr. Pradip Phanjoubam on our open debate. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Phanjoubam, as a result of the Agneepath scheme, many young men with military training will be rendered jobless at a tender age of 22 since they said the service is for 4 years. So how true is the statement, since the scheme mentions that only 25% of the top performers would continue with the service, and the rest of the 75% would be obviously would be youths in the lurch. So wouldn't that result in law and order problem in the country?
Well, no, that is a possibility in the sense that you have young people, you recruit them when they're 21, and then you keep them for 4 years. When they're 25, they lose their job. They will have to find another job. Many of them will find a job, but many may not. And also, the people who are absorbed is only 25%, and they will be there for another 15 years only. After that, they will have to retire. The idea is to keep the army young. That is okay. But the only thing is that, once upon a time we thought the age of war was over, and that the army was more going to be like the UN peacekeeping force. So they will be doing more policing job and all that, because there will be no wars. But that scenario has changed. So probably that's why there is this need to keep the army young. So you start with this scheme. The only problem is you will be upsetting a lot of what has actually stabilized. For instance, there's been so much of write-ups on this particular policy that while there are some good points, there are also bad points. In the sense that, the Indian Army is built on the idea of regimental loyalty, that you are in the Gurkha Rifle, you actually give yourself that particular regiment for life, that you are loyal to that regiment as much as you are to the nation. And this is what the Indian Army has come to be about. And that thing is, this is going to be totally upset. And for instance, a young man joining any of these regiments, joining a Gurkha Rifle, he will be actually dedicating himself to that thing. But now what's going to happen is going to be more like a career. You have a career option. You have 4 years, you'll make some money, and after that you look after yourself. So that may cause some social kind of unrest, in a sense that even if it's not an unrest, it's going to cause some instability. And also, you are training people to use arms and all that for 4 years. And should they become unemployed, they can be very troublesome. Their trouble potential will be much more. If they go into antisocial activities, for instance, that can actually become a very big issue. So they will have to be aware of absorbing a good number of them, but that may not be possible given the fact that there is so much of competition for jobs. The other once they leave the job that they have in the army, there are not going to be any jobs waiting for them. We are just waiting for you to finish your 4 years and then do a job. That kind of thing is not going to happen. So they will have to be looking for that job again. Some of them maybe absorb into some other forces and all that, but not all. That's going to create a lot of problem. But the biggest problem, many people have observed, is the idea of the regimental honor, regimental loyalty is going to not last with this kind of recruitment policy. Right. And that may actually harm the spirit of the Indian Army, because the Indian Army has been built that way. And India is such a diverse country. And what is going to happen is now the young people are going to be recruited by by a centralized kind of recruitment process. Okay. So that the regional representation. For instance, once upon a time, you thought Gurkhas would be joining Gurkha Rifles to the maximum, and the South Indians would be joining the Madras Regiment. That kind of regional representation was there, and Assam Regiment, most of them would be from Assam, although there will be other people as well. Right. But now it's going to be like the IAS or something, that you have the UPSC conducting your exams, and then you will be, if you score a certain points, then you will be allotted to the different regiments. That may actually destabilize the already stabilized kind of outlook to the army, and this has proven its utility throughout the history. For instance, when the Khalistan movement was there, and the Sikhs had to be tackled, you can't, quite naturally, you will not actually use the Sikhs to actually fight the Khalistanis to the extent. For instance, when the Akal Takht, the Golden Temple raid had to be taken place because the Prindanwala was hiding inside there, you cannot use the Sikhs because they are, there is some bit of sympathy or empathy for the community. So they had to use, General Sundarji had to bring in the Madras Regiment to storm the Golden Temple. And then when there was lots of revolts by the Sikhs, every Sikh regiment everywhere in Bihar and elsewhere, and the Indian Army had to use the Gurkha regiment to actually subdue that kind of rebellion. This kind of loyalty to the regiment, which had proven to be very, very useful, may no longer be there. If you have people coming in for 4 years, and you're also going to the army as a career option, not the Gurkha Rifles or the Dogra regiment or the Jat regiment. You want to be there because you like that culture. It's no longer like that. It's going to be like the UPSC, very impersonal, very technical kind of a selection process by which if you're selected, you'll be allotted your position. So that may actually harm the spirit of the Indian Army as we know it today. And maybe, some people are saying that may be good for the good, but it also can be for the bad in the long run, because, the culture of the Indian Army, the regimental honor, to repeat the same thing again, it may die out in the process. It will just become just another, for a small country like Israel, this is workable in the sense that you have one language and then also more or less one community there, so you can have the army, unit A, unit B, unit C. But here we have Gurkha Rifle, Assam Regiment. Right. This kind of the diversity of India is actually represented even in the army. So that diversity, if you try to break that diversity, there may be backlashes in the long run.
I think even the food habits would be disturbed, because
the food habit and all that, it's going to be all mixed up. Yes. Okay, if you wanted to do it completely secular kind of an arrangement where it's just by the marks to score your like if, for instance, you want your home posting, you have to score 7 marks. If not, you'll be posted in Kerala, or it just as in the IAS, IPS, and it will depend on how you perform in that selection process. It will no longer depend on your ethnicity or your area of domicile. Right. And those things were very, very important for India. That you see, and also when you select like that, Maybe some regions will not be represented anymore in the army. There's no, like in the IAS, there is a certain pattern of exam, and some will master that examination, the selection process, and they will get into the army. And maybe, supposing for say 10 years you don't have anybody selected from Manipur or Nagaland or Bihar. Bihar, of course, no, they will be, because they are to that. Even in the IAS, they are into that selection. Their competitive thing is there. But just imagine that any region fails to be represented in the army in a substantial way for a long time, and say you begin to look at the army as something which is alien to you, that is no longer part of your culture. It is somebody else. Only the chance of being represented there, and they get posted here, and you don't see any face that's similar to you, speaking the same language or understanding your culture. Then that alienation process may begin. That is one of the worries. So I think even this criticism will have to be taken seriously, because when you just bulldoze through with just one idea, that can have serious backlash in the long run.
Absolutely. So those are really good points that can be considered. Thank you for your input. I'll move on to Advocate Luwang. Advocate Luwang, Agneevirs will be infused into the civil society as it's planned right now, where they can contribute immensely towards the nation building process, apparently. Considering the rate of unemployment in India after getting a steady remuneration for 4 years and other benefits as well, those who do not make it into the top 25, the 75% that we're talking about, wouldn't they pose a threat to the law and order of the country, as we just spoke about? It's quite evident that it's a high possibility that they would. So what can we do about that?
Yeah, as Tamo Pradip has expounded, I to an extent subscribe to his observation. Out of the 75%, the immediate challenge before the government is what to do with that 75% of soldiers
after 4 years
who didn't qualify for the 25% who will ultimately have job for the next step. Now, the government has come up with some scheme, some announcement, like say that those 75% will be given a certificate which is equivalent to 12 standard certificate, and some bridging course and all that, and loan and scheme, this and that. And then that 10% is in, if I believe, in Coast Guard, Defense Force, and the 16 defense PSUs. Then possibly another 10% in Central Armed Police Force and Assam Rifles.
Okay.
The list goes on, and a lot of states have come forward with a commitment that those guys who form part of the 75% force will be given priority in government recruitment. But there's always a difference between reservation and a priority, because the priority has to be crystallized in what way, and it will be a part of the law, or will it be given some kind of extra mark, this and that. So that has to be crystallized, and that has not crystallized till now. Now, to a specific question, yes, in a country like India, which cannot be compared with other countries, and I do not agree with the observation, I think, that by one of the panelists, that because other countries do have this system, so let's do it. Now, there is a lot of difference in our social security systems in those countries, in America, in France, in Israel. See, they have, even if a person gets kicked out from a job, say, in this instance from the post of a army man, there's a lot of social security guaranteed in those countries. I happen to work for one of the projects in America. We are trying to synchronize our India's social security system with that of America, and have an agreement called totalization agreement. And there I came to know, and I've been here in most of those places. Their social security system is so strong that even you get kicked out from your job, the state will ensure that you survive. They will give you even unemployment allowance depending on the number of dependents you have. So we cannot compare our state with advanced countries just because they have those systems. We can't have it here. The retired general has also made a statement that the army, as such, a purely social welfare organization, it has to be an effective fighting unit. Yes, the purpose would be to defend the country. To an extent, that is right. But you see what is happening in even in the contemporary world. There is nothing called experience, in every profession. I believe that it also applies to the army, to the active services. You see the war in Ukraine. There are a lot of reports which says that a lot of a substantial part of Russia's failure to capture, Kyiv or other parts of Russia and of Ukraine is partly because most of the Russian soldiers are young and a lot of conscripts are there. So there's nothing like experience. Of course, we should have a young fighting unit. That's very important. But again, as I said, there's nothing like experience. I also asked myself a question. 75% of people on the road after serving for 4 years with a annual what you call a golden handshake amount of around 11.75 lakh. Well, yes, it could help them, but they will always have the sense of insecurity while serving their 4 years term, because it's not a job, it's not a career for them, because they're serving for 4 years. So while their friends and their friends are doing other courses like maybe MBA or maybe some technical course, trying for some permanent job, they are at the moment in a temporary job.
Right.
Second, they're busy. They don't have time for other courses and other options. So after 4 years, 75% will find them in the luts. Although the government has promised a lot of things, but I don't think those schemes are.
May I interrupt
sufficient.
you here? During this 4 years in service, doesn't the scheme allow them to study further to complete their education, or is it just going to be training?
The policy is silent on that. I was looking at it. The policy is silent.
Okay.
But I don't think that they will have a breeze course after 4 years. They will give you certificate.
Because they would definitely be behind the people of their age group.
The academic schedule.
Yes.
And then 17 years old, almost retiring from the army at the age of say 21 years.
Right.
21 years was retiring at the age of 25 years. Almost in the practical sense.
Right.
So they have to face the outside world, who have been studying, who have been working for definite career options. So to an extent, they might find themselves at a disadvantage. That's one. Second is that. And then, as you said, as Pradip has observed, that they could become vulnerable to a lot of activities which could be otherwise unlawful, because they have to survive. Because that 11 lakhs will possibly last for, say, 1 year, 2 years, because 11 lakh in these days is nothing.
Right.
Well, of course, some of the enterprising guys some business venture for himself herself, so that is fine. But if we look at a larger picture, we are throwing out 75% of those people on the road with some amount of money in their hands. That's one. So there's a distinct possibility of and those are well trained guys. Of course, there's a belief that once an army, always an army, you will always have the discipline which will be imparted to you. Right. That's a belief which we have, and I hope those guys live up to that image. But again, hunger is something which cannot be, which is not subservient to any of the other options.
Correct.
So maybe that because they're well trained, they know how to use weapons. They have been trained militarily. They might be vulnerable to other unlawful activities. It's a possibility. Not that all of them will do it, because they have undergone military training. Who knows in Kashmir? Suppose if they make 10 people join this army for 4 years, get them trained, and then they get recruited by other unlawful organizations. It could happen in Manipur also.
Yes.
Instead of they training them, they get trained by the military. They come out and then they go to the Burmese jungles.
That's quite a possibility. Yes.
It's a possibility. Now, again, what I see is that there is a lot of you can say divide, within the political spectrum, even within the retired army generals. As I see them speaking on television channels. One of the generals, I think it's General Vaidya, he himself said that, of course it is correct that it is not conscription, the so-called draft, which is quite prevalent in some parts of the world, including Israel, China, and then Russia is a hybrid of both conscription and other options, voluntary recruitment. Now, what is happening is that General Vaidya has gone on record by saying that this, if you look at it practically, is some kind of a quasi conscription. What is happening is quasi conscription. Of course, they get recruited voluntarily. That's a difference. I said quasi. What is important is quasi. Okay. And second is that there's something very important called change management. When you change from the time-tested army structure, the recruitment system in India, to this new one, the change management by the government is not that great. Could have been done better. Okay. Maybe they take up a project or as a test project and see how the results are, and accordingly implement this policy gradually. Now, the fact of the matter is that India wants a lean and a smart army with weapons, because a lot of money is going to the pensioners, because 61 around armymen are retiring every day. So the government wants to use this kind of money for procuring arms and empowering ourselves, so which is a good thing. Now, by doing what? By taking people, by appointing people on a contractual basis. It's basically a contract. It's not there's no pension at the end of the day for any of them. Yeah. So now, apart from projecting our army or developing our army as a very strong fighting force, of course, the human factor also is very. The human factor is also very important. We cannot dehumanize our own people. Let them fight let them be busy for 4 years, and then suddenly they are on the road. Of course, with some facilities here and there are there. Right. That's one part of it. Now. Second is that apart from that, regimental issues which Pradip has highlighted. Now, I note that there is not all of us are going to be absorbed for another 15 years. Then there is always be some kind of a trust issue or some kind of a not a very healthy competition amongst the colleagues who are joining them. Because some notes. Obviously, most of them will try to get in that 25% bracket, but in that pursuit of getting in that 25%, there could be possibly a lot of issues, which can be disciplinary, which can be some bit of, I say, interpersonal politics. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. Now, if you look at it as a matter of government policy, this policy is in tandem with, what is happening in the government sector also. Essentially, I'll give you some statistics. Employment generation I'll give 2 crore. I'll create 2 crore employment, this and that. It's easy to say. Now, what the government has been doing recently, I have been serving a lot of public sector companies as my clients. So I especially in the hydrocarbon sector, like the ones who are in the upstream and downstream segment of hydrocarbon. Look at the statistics of 2020. Around 73,000 people who are working for IOCL are on contract basis. It's of March 2020. And then for BPCL, around 72% of its staff are on contract basis. That is around 28,923. And for ONGC, around 80% of its staff are on contract basis. Now, to me, any kind of engagement on contract basis, yes, it's a temporary relief for those guys who are on a job. But again, at the term of 2 years or 4 years or whatever, I think it's basically for peons and the clerks, it's 2 years. Then he has to look for another job. I myself had that occasion to employ somebody from a public sector company. He was basically a peon, and I used to go there for giving meetings, this and that. He was basically very worried. One day I asked him what happened. He said, my contract period is retiring. It's coming to an end. No, I don't know where to find his job. Seeing his plight, I told him, now you join me. So I had him in my office. So there's a plight of people who are in this kind of a service sector. And I believe that the minimum age required, the minimum educational requirement for these soldiers is 10 pass. I mean, or which is applicable to that particular grade. That's what I come to know. Yeah. So again, coming to your specific question, yes, there's a specific possibility of these militarily well-trained people finding no job after 4 years of military service, and then landing up in some form of an unlawful activity because they have to survive. So that's the point. Yeah.
Thank you for your input, Advocate Luwang.
Yeah.
I'll start the second round with General Singh again. General Singh, can you tell us? It says Agneepath scheme wants to enhance the youthful profile of the armed forces and will provide Josh and Jazba. But the question arises here that, as Mr. Phanjoubam said, that the selection process will be centralized, and which would mean that people may get displaced from wherever they belong. So how isn't that going to affect the spirit of army, the Indian Army? So wouldn't that also pose a problem?
I will first say, are we prepared to go to 21st century, or do we want to stay still in the 19th century? If we want to stay in 19th century, there should be no change, there should be no revolution. We must continue hitherto. Whatever was going on is all fine. We continue la 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 la. But the question is, as a nation, we have to look forward. Now, I will put certain facts, which was, firstly, there is going to be no effect on the regimentation. It is maybe about 5%. About 5% is what is going to be a Rajput regiment will remain a Rajput regiment.
Okay.
A Bihar regiment is going to remain Bihar regiment. Madras regiment, the troop compositions are going to be the same. But yes, just to ensure that certain aspects are looked into, maybe a dilution of about 5 to 10% is what is.
Okay.
Secondly, as I brought out, this scheme is nothing new. It has been continuing in our country for a long time. It started off sometime during the Chinese aggression, when we had the emergency commission, and it continued as Source Service Commission. Now, unfortunately, why is there so much of opposition suddenly? Opposition is there because, firstly, a number of the coaching centers, they feel that they are going to be affected. Secondly, since there has been less recruitment because of those who were aspiring to suddenly join the army, they find that, oh, I may not be able to serve for 15-20 years. I'll put this way and other way around. Are we giving the army job to the whole nation? No. Are we giving it to the 10% of the youths of the nation? We are not giving it to even 5% of youths of the nation. It will be the case, as brought out by my other panelists. Order the job to everyone. That is really not possible. While we are bothered about the so-called 1/3 of those, or 3/4 of those who have joined the army, we are not bothered about millions and millions of youths who cannot even make it in the first. And secondly, even after returning, somebody is security square. That something man, yes, they brought out some of the pictures as early as even now as early as 30, 35, 40. He can do the same. But has he done it? No. Yet not. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, I fully appreciate the apprehensions of my fellow panelists. But in my opinion, they're all thrills. You know, you talk, really, if this happen, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. But the crux of the thing is three factors. Professionalism of the army has to be retained. And professionalism can be only retained when you have a tougher company. The army has to be a young. When I say young, I'm not talking about conscripts or recruits as broad or from my panelists about what is happening in Russia. It is a different period. I will put that way around. What happened to Afghanistan? Afghanistan collapsed within no time. Then you look at Ukraine. Ukraine still continues to fight. Though you have expected that the Ukrainians will collapse in 2 weeks' time, they still continue to fight. So war is a very dynamic thing in which it is not necessary that even if you have everything, you may not win. Like if you want to see the Second World War, for 2 years the Axis were winning all the battles, but they managed to lose the war. So it is not all that as simple as it is being described. There are many complex issues. Then it comes down to the making the army a well organized. Well, this is the irony. Army job is to fight. When you fight, during the fight, yes, like as I brought out, my nation comes first, the troops I command comes second, and myself last. This is very, very important. And the same, it is the ethos, it is the training, it is what I have been taught by my colleagues that I have to do. Today, even after retiring for 40 years, if I am asked today to lead a section of 10 people against 100 people, I will still lead. I am aware that my chances of success are very, very less, but having decided a plan, I will go as per the plan. I will not keep on debating till the outcome.
But General Singh, this is a short-term scheme where they'll only be serving for 4 years. So would they have that kind of sentiment? And they'll be pretty young. So after the 4 years, would they have the similar kind of a sentiment? General Singh? Oh, okay. I think we've lost connection with General Singh. I'll move. The next question will be for Mr. Phanjoubam. Mr. Phanjoubam, how fair is this scheme to the people who've been working hard and preparing to join the armed forces? So would they lose out on the recruitment process because of the age bar? Because there's been a little change in the age bar as well. And also, as General Singh was just saying that they put self last. But as the question that I had for him, I think I'll pass it on to you. How much would they be? How much would they carry that sentiment of putting themselves last? Because this is going to be a very young group, and also it's going to be a very short-term scheme. So how much would they dedicate to the country? Because this seems like more like a career option than a voluntary service to the nation. Again, considering the age.
I think you have missed it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that's precisely what people are worried about. That, you may have people who are not actually committed to the job. You're there because, you just want to be, also you're so young. You just want, it's like a new adventure or something that you could go into. But the fact is that you go into there with a metric certificate, and then you come out with a metric certificate. And there's nothing going to be more. And every year you're going to have, if you are recruiting 1 lakh a year, then after 4 years there's going to be 75,000 people retiring from that job, and each year is going to mount. Each year 75,000. So after, if you join at the age of 20, for instance, you'll be 25 by the time 24, or if you join at 21, you'll be 25 by the time you are out of the army, and then by the time you are in 10 years, there's going to be 750,000 people like that, and it's just going to mount. And in 10 years, the first batch of people who retired will be only 35. At 35, you have 750,000 of your kind of skills who've been in the army looking for jobs. And after 20 years, it's going to be just 45 years. And 45 years, it's going to be 14 lakh people of that same caliber, looking for job. And it's not too much of a caliber, in the sense that you know how to fight, but then you may not be able to do any other job, not many other jobs. So you may find yourself as a misfit. And that is one of the biggest worries. And the other thing is that, in other countries, they have this thing as well, Israel and US and all that. But there is more like a commitment that you're supposed to give some service. So if you are working in some place, you can take a leave and then go into the army for a while, and go back to the same job. And also the job situation is not as bad as here in India, where you have an advertisement for say government drivers or peons, and PhD scholars are actually applying for those kind of jobs. So there's so much rush for jobs, and unless you improve that, I don't see how those people who are still so young and who've been in a job, they'll be out of the job. If you didn't get a job all the while, then you'll be looking for a job. But if you've been in a job and then you've just been thrown out, or you just by compulsion you have to leave the job, there'll be some bit of bitterness that why is this happening to me? That kind of question will always come about. And the point is, they will be so young when they retire. 24 if you retire, you can imagine you have a whole life ahead. But in the olden days, what happens is you join the army, and then you know that you're going to be taken care of for your entire working career, and that's why the loyalty is there. Right. But if you're just there for 4 years, then why should I throw in all my life to that particular job?
Exactly.
I'm leaving. I have to look for another job. So while you're there in the job, you'll be starting to look for other jobs, because you know that you may not continue there. I mean, there's a good chance. 75% chance, because only 25% are going to be absorbed, that you are always insecure while you're at the job. While you're doing that job, so you will not be having your entire mind into that job, as well as a commitment. If you're there for life, as I was saying in the beginning, if you're there for life, if you're going to be looked after, and if you know that it's like a family, they're not going to betray you, then you yourself totally into that particular job. But that's not going to happen here. That you are there for 4 years is like a new experience. I will just try this, like going for a trek or adventure or something like that sort. Although it's a little longer than that. And after that, you know that here is something that I'm not going to be there permanently for. So I will have to be looking out for another job. That mindset is always going to be there. So I don't think we should be. There will be some good points, as the general was saying, but there are other adverse kind of circumstances which can actually overrun what you think are positive. And as for this whole thing about the 21st century or the 22nd century, even the 21st century, so 21st century, now they're saying that the future wars are actually going to be decided by artificial intelligence. It's not really soldiers anymore. Even in Ukraine, we're witnessing that you have the Russian soldiers coming in, and now they're picking up fast. They're also resorting to the same thing, that the drones are actually doing the worst damage. Drones, as well as the guided missiles, which for which you don't need foot soldiers. So if you're looking thinking in terms of 21st century, the future and all that, you should be concentrating on those kind of warfare, artificial intelligence warfare, where you have precise guided missiles and also the drones, and probably even they will start using artificial intelligence infantry and things like that, or infantry vehicles. Those kind of things are going to be what decides future wars. So I think also we have to be employing or absorbing people who can handle that particular kind of technology.
Right.
But if you take in people who just pass metric, it's going to take a long time. Maybe they will not have the fundamentals of actually understanding what that particular new technology is about.
Yes.
So I don't know, maybe there are other thoughts process which we haven't seen, but from what we see from here, from the outside, it does seem there are many loopholes.
Right. So we're just concentrating upon having a youthful look in the army, but we're not actually looking at so many other, like you just mentioned, like being, they say tech savvy. Tech savvy. Yeah, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, they have something that, in the army, as it is, people retire early, and by the time you have 40, many retire 38, 42, as General was also saying. So what's happening is one of the worries, which they are not saying it, with the policymakers are not saying it. One of the worries is how to handle the pension. Because if somebody retires at 40, he will be given a pension, and he will leave a vacancy. That job will have to be filled. So he'll be paying to one guy, he'll be paying a pension, the other guy he'll be paying the same salary.
Okay.
And then it just mounts because 40 people retire, and this is going to mount because at 40 if you retire, you're going to live another. If you live to be 80, then you have another 40 years of pension, and that 40 years you'll have 2-3 generations of vacancies which you have to fill. You're paying the salaries as well as the pension, and the pension bills are mounting. So I think probably without saying it, they're also thinking in terms of handling this kind of financial situation. But I think the more honest way of doing it would be to say that this is the case. We can't handle it anymore. The pension bills are too high. And as it is, we saw the last few years ago, the one rank, one pension agitation in the army. That they're saying that if an army officer retires or an army man retires, especially the officer, if you retire in 1 year, and then after 10 years. So if an army officer retires, say for instance as a major or a colonel, he'll be getting a certain salary, and his pension will be dependent on the salary that he was earning in that moment.
Okay.
And a few years later, maybe take 10 years or maybe 5 years. 10 years later, another colonel of the same rank retires. He will be earning a bigger salary, and he will be getting another pension slot. And the army officers are actually saying that we should have one rank, one pension. Even if I retire earlier, I should get the same pension as the man who retires later. So that even that kind of agitation is there, and it's a structural problem in a sense that these institutions like that you have to have people retire early, and if they retire early, if you give them pension, you'll be giving pension for a much longer time because they retired early. If I retire as a 65 as in the university and others, then you'll probably maximum another 15-20 years you'll live, and then your pension is gone. Your pension burden will be gone, the government's pension problem. But if he retires at 40, then this pension is going to linger on for another 40 years. And at 40 years, there will be layers and layers of other pensioners. So that the thing also they want to tackle. But they're putting it in a more acceptable way, that if we say this is the case, then there will be more protest. That you don't want to pay your people who sacrifice a life, and you're resorting to other means. That kind of thing can come about. So I think probably, there has to be an honest soul searching and say that this is also the problem. We will have to find a way out. We need a young army, that's true. Especially in these days when war has become, again, a reality. Once upon a time, we thought wars have ended. There's not going to be another war again. Especially after the Second World War, people thought there's not going to be another war. This was the war to end wars. But that is not the reality anymore. So maybe the young soldiers will be necessary. But as I was saying, in the future, maybe it's not a soldier necessary. It will be more the technology, the artificial intelligence, the guided missiles, and the drones, even satellite weapons. Those kind of things will be what decides victory in a war. So I think we shouldn't be thinking only. We shouldn't be giving this kind of gaslighting. I would say that we are looking to the future. The future has to be young, and young people get. Maybe there are other visions of the future which is stronger than what you're seeing it here now. That the more realistic vision is going to be artificial intelligence, the laser weapons which are going to be fired from these satellites. Those kind of things are probably, which is why the race for technology is so high. If you look at the other armies, China, for instance, they've also slimmed down their armies, and then they actually given more thoughts or more energy to actually upgrading their IA kind of warfare.
Thank you for your thoughts, Mr. Phanjoubam. I'll move on to, I think Mr. General Singh has been disconnected. He's not back. So I'll move on to Advocate Luwang. Advocate Luwang, Rajasthan MP Hanuman Benewal had said that recruiting young men into the army under the Agneepath scheme to give 6-month weapon training and removing them after 4 years will lead to incidents of gang war. Do you see this as a possible outcome of this scheme? Will it? What do you think? I mean, we've already discussed about it, but this could possibly actually lead to gang. I mean, that's quite a possibility, as if we look into it.
Yeah, as I said now before, there's a possibility, a definite possibility. Now, coming to your statement, you said 6 months of training. Now, apart from the 6 months of training, it's estimated that they also would be entitled to around 9 months of leaves, which they can apply for.
Okay.
So 9 months plus 6 months, it comes to a little more than 1 year. So practically, they will be in service for around 2 years and around 9 months.
Okay.
If you look at it practically. So that's one observation I want to make. Yes, it's a possibility. It may not be a gang war necessarily. Yes, it could be. They could become a fertile ground for recruitment by our gangs who are operating in basically in cities. That's a possibility. Not necessarily. It might lead up to a gang war because those guys who have just retired from or who are out of the army, I don't think they would be in the gang frame of mind. But economic circumstances might compel them to look for other avenues, which includes being in wrong hands. So that's very important. It could become a reality. Now, coming to the general statement about me first, nation first, me last. Now, I asked myself a question that if nation first is a real thing. Yes, nation first is the motto. It is the motto. Now, if there is the motto, then why don't we respect our soldiers who have joined our army to protect our nation by giving better terms and conditions? Why do we take them out as if they are dispensable items? After 5 years of employment, active in deployment, we can't use them as disposable items. Use and throw, as if in the corporate sector. So let them be there, get trained, and then let them have the option of, as Pradip Phanjoubam has said, also getting retired. They have the option of always getting out as and when they want, or remaining there for a longer time. That's one. Second, General also made a statement about short service commission. So you cannot compare these short service commission members to these sepoys, who are basically not 10 pass, most of them. The short service recruitment guys, I think, if I understand correctly, they can remain for 10 years, subject to extension of another 4 years. Again, if they want to apply for permanent absorption, they can do that. And compare the service conditions. Those guys in the short service commission are entitled to, I think, 5-figure salary. Most of them, 1 lakh, this and that. But for these guys who will be in the so-called temporary deployment for 4 years, the salary will be around, say, basic. They start with, I think, 40,000, then gradually increase to maximum, 30,000, and then gradually it might increase to 40,000. So that's a small amount if you look at it. Now, coming to the other scenario of who possibly could employ them after they get out of the army. Now, unlike their colleagues, unlike their other their friends who could be possibly from the 17th year, from the 18th year, one could be doing law, one could be doing medical, one could be doing engineering, or get into some professional stream. What is the skill they come out? They come out with a certificate of discipline, with a certificate of having an active physical active, what is called fitness. Who will absorb them? In my understanding, they will be basically deployed as since they being just 10th or 12th class with a certificate of deployment for 4 years, they might get employed as security guards, which are, according to me, clerks, peons, and then those multi-task guys who run around here and there with the disciplined thing in supposedly imbibed in them. Now, for the person who was drawing yesterday 40,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees to get a post of a security guard somewhere with a salary of max 10,000 rupees. At least that's the amount which given to a security guard in this part of the country, which is Delhi. Now, it is worse in case of Manipur. Where suppose these are the guys who may not be based in urban, well-to-do families. Most of them will be from tribal areas, from villages, towns, and the small places like Manipur. So when they go back, especially in Manipur, after serving for 4 years, they come back with 11 lakhs, amount. Okay, some smart people could be, stepping their life with the amount which they have been given. But for most of them, I'm not sure to what extent they can help themselves, unless until they decide to educate themselves by going for a professional stream, and then look for other better opportunities. Now, I was reading some academic stuff on this issue about what is that people are looking at and what is that we can judge whether a particular post or a deployment is good or bad. We can look at two perspectives, two different perspectives. One is the economic benefits. Of course, 30,000, 40,000 may not be that bad for a soldier to maintain himself, but with this amount of 30,000, 40,000, I don't think he is going to save anything. And there's no pension, nothing. There's no dearness allowance. It's just he'll be basically surviving from hand to mouth.
Right.
For a Manipuri, you have 3 weddings in a day. 2 lapatpas and then tagumbas, this and that. So you dole out a lot of money for that kind of events also. So it's not going to be economically very beneficial for them. It's just for their hand to mouth existence, especially for those who have a family. Even for bachelors, I think most of them will be bachelors. That 40,000 these days is nothing. Second is that whether that particular engagement or deployment sound exploitative in nature. That's a second perspective we can look at.
Right.
According to me, it has every semblance of being exploitative in nature, because you can't train him for 6 months, make him run 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, carry a lot of luggage with him, gun, this and that, train him. 6 months of training, and then some lips here and there, and then another about say 2.5 years, 3 years, what is left out, he will be actively deployed. And then, as Pradip has said clearly, there will be always their sense of insecurity or temporary engagement. As if he is in a expedition somewhere in the hills, and then when they go back to his home, he doesn't know what to do.
Right.
So he always will have that kind of insecurity in his head. So that's a distinct possibility. Now, if I just look at it from a local perspective, as I said, the situation is worse, and it's not possible to justify what they have happened to Western countries, because, as I said, first round, there's a very strong security system.
Advocate Luwang, I think there's some issues with the connection. It's. Are you there, Advocate Luwang? I think we're facing some. Okay. We can hear you. I think there's some. Okay, some problem with the network there. Well, we'll just wait for a little while more and see if we can get.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you now. I think we lost connection again. Okay. We lost the connection again. So I think for today we will have to consider. We'll have to see with the scheme that we're talking about, Agneepath scheme. We will need to see whether or not it will work. That we will get to know subsequently. Till then, we wait and watch and see whether the government will succumb to the pressure and take back the scheme or change the terms of the scheme, or would it be better if the government invested in modern warfare rather than such schemes? So that's for us to say. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching our show. I would like to thank, before I leave the show, I'd like to thank our panelists. We seem to have some sort of a net connection today. I'd like to thank Mr. Pradip Phanjoubam for being on our show, Advocate Junior Luwang for being on our show, and last but not the least again, General Singh for being on our show. And thank you for viewers for watching our show. Thank you all. I'm your host Utpala, signing off for tonight. See you again next Monday with another exciting topic. Good night.
Washing machine, fridge, smart TV, air conditioner, kitchen items, amadi makal khudingmakki home appliances kidamang poina waningai leite. Kaisampat Konsen Hazari Lekai Dalaiba, Measure of Imphal na ahongbo mamalda item khudingmakki up to 50% discount da offer tizari. Wedding set unalong matamdasu special oiba discount kaya su hamjari. Interest amatta yaudena 0% EMI loan ni kudong sabasu thanggari. Kudong sabasi makan biraganu ngasi maklengsin birau Measure of Imphal Kaisampat Konsen Hazari Lekai.